I was not prepared for what I discovered on that mission. It all seemed normal, a simple reconnaissance operation in the Middle East. But what I stumbled upon changed the course of history. Iran, which many saw as a predictable enemy, was developing a secret weapon so powerful that it could put the entire security of the United States at risk. And the shocking thing is, I was the only one who knew about it. I, an American veteran, discovered Iran's secret weapon and unwittingly revealed the biggest secret the regime had been trying to keep hidden. Imagine being in the middle of a routine mission, in a seemingly safe place, and suddenly you come across information so devastating that it could destroy the national security of your own country. As a mere veteran, I had no idea that what I was about to discover would be so big, so dangerous, that it would make me one of the most wanted people in the world. It all started with a simple mistake, a moment of distraction, but in that moment I was about to see what Iran was doing in secret and what they could use against the United States. The first thing I noticed was an unusual pattern of movement at the Iranian facilities. I was investigating areas that had never attracted much attention before. What appeared to be a simple military training camp turned out to be much more than that. Iran was hiding a warfighting technology, something so groundbreaking that if used against the United States, it could change the balance of world power. But how did this relate to me? What was so vital that Iran tried so hard to hide? How could a simple mistake have made me the key to revealing this secret? I'll tell you what I discovered now. They were working on a secret weapon, one that if used in an attack wouldn't require traditional planes or missiles. It was a cyber weapon, something that could hack into America's defense systems and cripple the country's entire military infrastructure. What I found was a form of silent warfare, a war where the weapons were unseen but where the consequences could be devastating. I knew that when I returned home with this information, my life would never be the same. What Iran was preparing was not just another nuclear or conventional threat. It was something invisible, something that put our entire security at risk. But here's the real question. What would you do if you were in my shoes? If you, like me, were the only person who knew about such a dangerous secret weapon, and you knew that the truth could change everything, but that your life and national security were at stake, would you make the decision to tell the world about it, or would you hide what you knew, fearing the repercussions? Iran was much closer to achieving mass-destructive cyber power than anyone realized. They were on the verge of using a potentially game-changing technology, but who would believe a veteran like me? How could I convince the United States government, without concrete evidence, that Iran was developing a secret weapon of such magnitude? The question that arises here is, how do you respond to an invisible threat? What would you do if you discovered that an enemy power was about to use technology to attack the United States in a way that no one expected but no one believed possible? I knew that my mission was far from over, and that what was at stake was not only my life, but the security of the country I had sworn to protect. The question now was not whether Iran was trying to do this, but whether we could act in time to prevent the threat from materializing. Minor, put yourself in my shoes for a moment. I am a veteran, someone who has been through situations that many people can only imagine. I have been on many battlefields around the world, facing relentless enemies and making life-changing decisions. But on that day when I was sent on a mission to the Middle East, I had no idea that this would be no ordinary mission. I was going to Iran, a place of enormous geopolitical complexity, and what seemed like a simple military reconnaissance field. What I didn't know was that by doing what I was asked to do, I had uncovered a threat so great that it would put my life and the safety of the entire world at risk. When I arrived at the camp, everything seemed calm. I was trained to detect any suspicious movement, to look for any sign that something was amiss. But as I investigated the area, I began to notice strange patterns, disjointed information, and movements that didn't make sense. What seemed like a simple routine exercise began to reveal something much more serious. As I analyzed the data and observed the movements within the facility, I realized that something was being hidden. What I found at that training camp was not just Iranian soldiers preparing for what appeared to be a conventional war. What I discovered was much more sinister. Iran was hiding technology that, if used against the United States, could destroy our security in a split second. And worst of all, no one had any idea it was about to happen. What Iran was creating was not a bomb or a conventional weapon. It was a cyber weapon, an invisible warfare technology capable of crippling the entire U.S. military infrastructure without firing a single shot. It was I, a simple veteran on a routine mission, who discovered this. I had unwittingly fallen into a hole of information so deep that the truth became an unbearable weight. I knew that what I had discovered could not be ignored. Iran was about to launch a cyber attack of devastating proportions. They had developed a means of attacking America's defense systems without leaving a trace, creating a strategy that could weaken the entire national security system without firing a single missile. I went straight to the American authorities, unaware that my life had already changed forever. I was no longer just a veteran, a soldier doing his duty. I had become the key to preventing a global war, something Iran was trying to hide at all costs. But as I told them everything I knew, what seemed like a simple truth turned into a race against time. I knew the information was too dangerous to ignore, but I also knew that revealing it would put me at risk. The truth I held in my hands was not just a physical threat, it was a strategic threat, something that could destabilize world peace and alter the global order. And most frightening of all, I knew that if this information fell into the wrong hands, it would be too late to act. Iran was about to take a step that would change everything, and I was at the center of that truth, trying to do whatever it took to get the authorities to act before it was too late. Now I ask myself, how would you react if you were in my shoes? Would you remain silent, knowing that the security of your country and even the world was at stake, or would you take action, risking your life to reveal the truth that could save millions? I knew my mission was far from over, and what Iran was about to do was not something that could be ignored. But the real question is how to act in the face of something so big, knowing that you are the only person who can stop it from happening. The truth I brought back with me wasn't just about Iran or the United States. It was about the future of world peace, about how an unseen attack could change everything. And with it, my journey was about to become even more dangerous than ever. I knew that by revealing this information, my life would never be the same. But if I didn't, what would happen to the future? Coring everything I had learned up to that point left me in a state of confusion and dread. But the real turning point was when the situation took an unexpected turn, and without me knowing it, the pieces began to move irreversibly. I knew that what Iran was preparing was not something that could be ignored, but that night in the middle of the mountains of the Middle East, the gravity of the situation became clear in a way that I had never imagined. After weeks of gathering information, not really knowing who I could trust, I finally found irrefutable proof of what was going on behind the scenes. During a raid on Iran's military facilities, I found a room full of documents and data that clearly outlined the secret weapon they were developing, a cyber warfare technology that could take down the entire U.S. military infrastructure. They were working on something that, if released, would not only disable our defense systems, but completely paralyze the U.S. military's ability to respond. The exact moment I found out about this was the moment that changed my life forever. I was rummaging through a secret room when I came across a set of classified files detailing the ongoing operation. They weren't just preparing for a conventional attack. What Iran had done was create a control system that, once activated, could prevent the United States from responding by shutting down our communications, manipulating our defense systems, and essentially leaving us vulnerable to an attack from anywhere in the world, with no way to fight back. But what caught me off guard was how close they were to completing this secret weapon. They were almost ready to put it into action, and the most shocking thing was realizing that no one outside the inner circle of the Iranian government knew how advanced the technology was. I was the last person who could stop this from happening, and I knew that if I didn't act quickly, what Iran was preparing would become a reality that no one could stop. As I fled with the documents and evidence of what I had discovered, the sense of urgency and fear grew stronger. The weight of responsibility was upon me, and I knew my mission was far from over. But what I didn't know was how willing the U.S. government and Trump himself would be to believe the gravity of my revelation. I had the evidence, but how could I convince those in power that Iran was one step away from launching a cyber attack that could destroy our entire military infrastructure? When I arrived in the United States, things didn't go as I had imagined. I knew this information was vital to national security, but my status as a simple veteran, a field man, seemed to be insufficient to convince the authorities. I was just another piece in the puzzle, or so they thought. But what I was trying to warn about was much bigger than any traditional threat. I was dealing with an invisible threat, one that could not be detected by traditional defense systems. A war that was not fought with visible weapons, but with codes, with digital manipulation, with the power to destroy silently. The turning point, however, came when I finally got a meeting with Trump. I knew he was the only one who could act quickly, who could understand the magnitude of this, but even he seemed skeptical. I didn't have much time to explain, so I got straight to the point. I showed him the evidence. I talked about the cyber threat and how Iran was on the verge of completing a technology that, if activated, could completely paralyze the United States. I expected him to act, to make a decision, but instead he stared at me, silent, for longer than I expected. I knew he was processing what I was saying, but the reality was that he was dealing with a threat no one had ever imagined possible. And that's when the real battle began. How do you convince someone that, incredible as it may be, the truth about Iran and its ability to manipulate our defenses is real? How could I, a mere veteran, deliver such a shock to the U.S. security establishment? Iran was on the verge of creating a new form of warfare, invisible, cybernetic, and devastating, and I was the only one who knew. I knew that if I didn't act quickly, the window of opportunity to stop the attack would close. I was becoming a key player in stopping the largest cyber attack in the history of international relations. Now the question was, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Knowing that the only thing standing between a silent war and the collapse of global security was your word, would you speak out, even knowing you might be discredited? Or would you try to remain silent, waiting for others to take the reins? I knew I had no choice. I had to act. After I revealed the truth to President Trump, the room fell dead silent. He stared at me for a few seconds, processing the gravity of what he had just heard. And in that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. The weight of the words I had spoken and the evidence I had brought was something he could not ignore. But at the same time, he knew he could not act without more information, without confirming what I had discovered. What was at stake was not just the security of one nation, but the equilibrium of the entire world. Iran had created a secret weapon so powerful, so complex, that it could destroy our ability to respond without firing a single shot. Trump was aware of the growing cyber threat, but what I revealed about Iran went beyond anything he or his team had imagined. This wasn't just a conventional war or nuclear weapons. Iran was building an invisible power, a weapon that could literally paralyze the United States without anyone noticing until it was too late. It was a silent attack, a digital coup so deep that if it were activated, it would prevent the United States from reacting in time. What frightened me most was that until that moment, the international community, including the United States, had no idea how close Iran was to gaining complete control of our vital infrastructure. The cyber attack they were planning would not only target military installations, they could, in theory, cripple our communications networks, our digital defenses, everything that relies on technology to function. This meant that without warning, we could be attacked by an invisible weapon that would be impossible to neutralize without the proper defenses. And most frightening of all, Iran was already testing its weapons in small, unnoticed attacks as a preparation for what was to come. Trump looked at me, his expression serious now, and asked a direct question: what should we do now? I knew he wasn't just asking for my opinion. He was trying to understand the gravity of the situation and whether the information I had brought was concrete enough to warrant immediate action. The problem was that Iran had a long and well-orchestrated strategy, and taking hasty action could set off a chain reaction that would have even more dire consequences. But I also knew that inaction in this case was a recipe for destruction. I needed the president to see the urgency of the situation. Mr. President, I said, this is not just a cyber attack. Not only has Iran prepared to weaken our defenses, but it is creating a scenario in which any response we make will be ineffective. They are rigging the game, and we are blind to the game. If we do not act now, the defense system that protects our nation could be completely paralyzed. We must disrupt Iran's operations before they make us play by their rules. He nodded slowly, but I knew there were still doubts. What I was saying affected not only national security, but could alter the entire dynamics of global power. Trump was aware of the risk of escalation. He knew that a military response to Iran, with its own alliances and cyber weapons, could trigger a conflict on multiple fronts. But he also knew that Iran could not be left free to carry out what it was about to do. By the time the meeting was over, I knew my mission was far from over. What I had discovered was not something that could simply be brushed aside. Now more than ever, I knew the real battle would be to convince others that what I was saying was the truth. Iran was not just a military threat, they were playing a strategic game, trying to weaken global powers from within, undermining their power structures before they even physically attacked. Now more than ever, the dilemma arises: would you in my place act the same way? Knowing that the truth you carry could make or break the future of a nation, would you take the reins and risk your life to reveal this information? Or would you hesitate, thinking of the consequences and the risk it would pose to your personal safety? I knew that if I did the right thing, my life would be at risk. But I also knew that without this action, the future of many would be in jeopardy. Comment below, I want to know your honest opinion about this. Would you make the decision to act, knowing that the truth you carry could destroy everything Iran is trying to hide? Or would you remain silent, waiting for others to take control of the situation? What would you do, knowing that the future of so many depends on your decision? After I revealed the full truth about what Iran was hiding, things quickly spiraled out of control. The reaction from Trump and his aides was exactly what I feared. They knew that if what I said was true, America's national security and even global security were at risk. But at the same time, they didn't know if they could trust me completely. I knew the information I brought was too devastating to ignore, but it was a ticking time bomb, and time was running out. The administration knew it could not take rash action against Iran. The last thing it wanted was a full-scale war, especially with an enemy that was so well prepared to fight in ways no one could predict. Iran was not just developing physical weapons. They were creating an invisible war, a cyber war that could be launched without warning and without anyone knowing what was happening until it was too late. I knew that if Iran was already so close to completing its secret weapon, any hesitation could be fatal. As out of control as the situation seemed, all I knew was that President Trump was the only one with the power to take decisive action. I was now at the center of a battle far greater than any military mission I had ever faced. This was a war for survival, for world peace, and the only thing at stake was the future of generations to come. What Iran was planning was not a conventional threat. It was a silent attack, a cyber war that could destroy the global defense system without leaving a single trace of who was responsible. I knew my mission was not complete. What I had brought back to the United States was not just crucial information, but a ticking time bomb. Now what remained was a race against time to ensure that Iran was stopped before it could complete its weapon and launch a global attack. But there was something even more important. What would you do now, knowing that the future of the entire world was in your hands? The truth was staring us in the face. But what needed to be done now was not simple. I knew the only way to avert catastrophe was to act before it was too late. The pressure was on Trump's shoulders, and the decision could not be delayed any longer. What would he do? Did he know how much the world was at stake? But this was not just a military decision. The threat from Iran involved an invisible war, and the future of our global security depended on how the president and the administration responded. They were out of time. Time was against all of us. Now I want to know from you, if you were in Trump's shoes, what would you do? With the safety of the entire world at stake, would you make the decision to act immediately, or would you hesitate, fearing the consequences? Would you risk war to save millions of lives, or would you trust that things would work themselves out? Comment below. I want to know your opinion on what should be done. What would you do knowing that the truth could change the fate of the world, and that the only thing between peace and war was your decision? If you believe the truth needs to come out and we need to act before it's too late, please like and share this video. The world needs to know what's going on, and together we can ensure that this information reaches the leaders who can make a difference. If you want to continue following the journey of this story and understand what will happen next, subscribe to the channel. The battle for truth is far from over, and you won't want to miss what's coming. Join us and don't miss the next chapters of this mission of survival and revelation. The future is in our hands.